curious what happens if you spin a blank off-center on purpose? Let's find out. So for nearly every spinning, you're always working with a blank that is perfectly centered on the lathe so that then you're going to make a concentric and perfectly trimmed spinning. I was curious one time what would happen if you set the blank off-center on purpose and what kind of spinning you might end up with. And what resulted from that little experiment was this little guy. And so what I determined is that the angle of that spinning is determined by how far offset you put the blank into the lathe. So I thought I'd make a quick little video about that. And just a couple things to be aware of is since it's offset in the lathe, you can't trim it while you're working. Which you can do with normal concentric spinnings. And you need to be really careful with how much force you're using because most of the time the tool will be out on air, just like doing a live edge turning or something like that. So I have an annealed blank of 3-inch diameter, 20 gauge, 1100 alloy aluminum set in there. And I've pre-lubricated it with paste wax. And we'll get started. So what I always like to do is get the blank seated, and this is especially important with the off-center blanks because it can shift and create other problems down the road. So let's get to it. So again, I'm going to get the tool in there and make sure that the blank is seated nice and firmly against the base of the chuck for forming. Then I'll slowly work my way out to the edges. But I really want to get in there, make sure it's nice and firmly up against that chuck so it's not going to shift while I'm working. And then the rest of the time you want to go very slowly because the amount of force is very little, and so it's easy to use too much force and cause the blank to wrinkle as you go. And what I like to do, because I'm not used to the off-center or non-concentric spinnings, is I like to stop a lot of times and just to check to see how the form is developing on there. And I'm looking through the form to see its silhouette while I'm working. But even just stopping and taking a look at it, depending what the piece is for, maybe it's for a different kind of candle holder or something like that. So again, working very slowly, controlling the path of the tool, not relying on the resistance of the metal, particularly as you get out towards that edge. Too much force, it really wants to wrinkle very easily because it's not an even material all the way around centered on the lathe. So that outer edge really has a tendency to wrinkle very easily. So I'm just going to try and get a nice smooth curve to it. But I think it's a way of just a nice minimal design. Has a higher edge that can act as like a little reflector for a small candle or something like that, or can be interesting sort of sculptural parts. Stopping frequently to see how the form is developing. And I'm going to kind of tighten it up on the lower part a little bit and have it flare out a bit more. Just really looking at the silhouette of the form, getting smooth flowing lines in the form. Keep going a little bit. Nice even strokes. And again, you can't trim to even anything up, so you really have to rely on the spinning technique. And this is going to end up being a lower, kind of different form from that other first sample that I showed. I think I'm almost there. So you can kind of get a sense of how that's developing. And I think it's a subtlety to the piece. Obviously this one is a lot different from this one, but you get a sense and maybe something that you just sort of notice in its design. Again, depending whatever you're making the part for, whether it's a little candle cup or part of a larger piece or something like that. But it's just a kind of a quick and easy, slightly different approach, certainly something that they don't do in production shops. And you can just try out for yourself and see what kind of forms you can develop. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can hear from me when I post future videos. Thanks for stopping by.